Hey everyone, and welcome back to another reading update. Now today I actually have quite a bit to talk about. I finished one of the most influential science fiction novels of the last few decades, and I have a lot to say about it. Because I finally read Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And while I think it's a fantastic book with some incredible world building and science fiction ideas, there was also one thing that disappointed me. And I'm also currently reading the ninth book in the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Although this one has had a slightly slower start than I was hoping for. And finally, I'll talk about the book I'm planning to read next to finish the month. A short science fiction novel that caught my attention because it was compared to one of my favorite movies, Inception. So yeah, let's get into it. Like I said, I did finish Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And what a great novel this was. Uh, I had heard so many good things about Hyperion before reading it. And with a book that has such a strong reputation, there's always the possibility that it won't live up to the hype. But in this case, I can definitely understand why so many people consider it one of the great science fiction novels. The thing that impressed me most was probably the world building. This universe just feels incredibly rich. A lot of science fiction novels have one big central idea. Maybe they explore on one interesting piece of technology, one alien civilization, or just one scientific concept. And Hyperion feels completely different. It feels like Dan Simmons had 10 different great science fiction ideas and decided to put them all into the same novel. And somehow it mostly works. There's just so much happening in this universe. You have different planets, different societies, artificial intelligence, strange technology, religion, war, time, and of course the mysterious Shrike. And almost every time one of the pilgrims tells their story, another part of the universe is revealed. And that's probably what I found most impressive about the structure of the novel. Hyperion follows a group of pilgrims who are traveling to the planet Hyperion. And they have all been chosen for this journey, and each of them has their own reasons for going there. And during the journey, they agree to tell each other their stories. So instead of getting one straightforward narrative, the book is almost like a collection of several different stories connected by this larger journey. And each of these stories feels very different. Some are more emotional, some are more mysterious, some focus more on the science fiction ideas, and others tell you more about the history of this universe. And through these stories, you slowly learn about the pilgrims themselves, but you also learn more and more about the world they live in. And I really enjoyed that approach, because the world building never felt like someone simply stopping the story to explain how the universe works. Instead, we discover this world through the experiences of the characters. That said, my biggest disappointment with Hyperion was probably the main plot. There actually isn't that much of one. The central story is these pilgrims traveling towards Hyperion, but because so much of the novel is focused on the individual stories they tell, the main journey doesn't move forward very quickly. And by the time I finished the book, I definitely felt like the main story was only just beginning. And normally that might be a bigger problem for me. I do like books with a strong plot, And I don't always enjoy books that spend hundreds of pages setting things up without giving much of a payoff. But with Hyperion, I didn't really mind it as much as I expected to. And this, I think, that I became very invested in the characters and the stories. And by the end of the book, I wanted to know what was going to happen to all of them. And their individual stories had given me enough reason to care about the larger journey. That's why I find it really difficult to imagine reading this book and deciding that I don't need to read the sequel. Because apparently a lot of people read Hyperion and don't continue with the next one, The Fall of Hyperion. And of course, everyone reads differently. So if you were satisfied with the first book, that's of course completely fine. But personally, I really don't understand how I could stop here. There are just still so many questions, and the larger story is far from finished. The characters are heading towards something incredibly important, and after spending an entire book getting to know them and learning why they are on this journey, I absolutely want to know what happens next. To me, Hyperion feels like a book that is setting up a larger story. The first book gives you the world, introduces the characters, and tells you why all these people are going to Hyperion. And I want to see what happens when they actually get there. So yeah, I'm very excited to read the Fall of Hyperion. I don't know when I'll get to it yet, but after finishing this book, I definitely want to continue the series very soon. And I was also asked by NJ from the Book Review Star channel how Hyperion compares to Dune. Because they are both such influential science fiction novels. And I found it a really interesting question. Because they are both huge names in science fiction, but personally my experience reading them was very different. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Dune you'll find on BookTube. And I know that's probably not the most popular opinion, because Dune is considered one of the greatest and most influential books in the genre. And I can absolutely see why it is important. I can see the influence it has had, and I don't think it's a bad book at all. It's just one of those books that just didn't completely work for me. And one of the reasons is that to me, Dune felt more like a fantasy story set in space. You have this huge world, powerful families, prophecies, religion, a chosen one, and a story that feels almost mythological. And there are science fiction elements, but when I was reading it, it didn't really feel like the kind of science fiction I personally enjoy most. And I think Hyperion feels very different. To me, this feels like a proper science fiction novel. I don't mean that Dune isn't science fiction, because of course it is. But when I think about what I personally love about the genre, I think about big ideas and strange concepts. I want futuristic technology, different worlds, questions about humanity, artificial intelligence, and ideas that make you think about what the future could look like. And Hyperion gives me a lot of that. It feels like every story introduces another science fiction concept. And I think that's why I probably connected with it more than I did with Dune. And as for which one is more influential, that is where I really struggle to give an answer. Dune is obviously massively influential. There's no question about it. Its impact on science fiction is enormous, And you can see its influence in books, movies, games, and just so many other things. But personally, I do wonder if Hyperion had more influence on science fiction in the way I think about the genre. Simply because it feels more directly focused on science fiction ideas. I'm not saying that Hyperion is definitely more influential than Dune. It would be a very difficult thing to prove, and I think you could make a strong argument for either book. I think it probably depends on what you mean by influence. Dune might have had a much bigger cultural impact overall, while Hyperion might have influenced certain science fiction ideas and writers in a different way. So I honestly don't have a definitive answer to that question. But if you're asking me which book I personally enjoyed more, at least so far, it's definitely Hyperion. I connected with the world more, I enjoyed the science fiction ideas more, and by the end I was much more excited to continue the story. And it just started raining here. Anyway, that was Hyperion, a great novel, fantastic world building, lots of brilliant science fiction ideas, and some really interesting characters. But my biggest criticism is that there isn't much of a main plot, but I think that this book is clearly building towards a sequel. And I absolutely can't wait to read The Fall of Hyperion. But yeah, that on Hyperion. Currently I'm reading Upheaval by Yoshiki Tonaga. And this is the 9th book in the Legend of the Galactic Hero series. And I honestly can't believe I'm already this far into the series. Even though I have been reading it for quite a while, this has become one of those series where I really want to see how the larger story develops. There are so many characters, so much politics, and just this huge conflict between the Galactic Empire and the Free Planet Alliance. And to be honest, Upheaval had a bit of a slow start for me. And I think the reason is that this series depends very heavily on its plot. There are series where you can have a slow section and still really enjoy the book because you just love spending time with the characters. You might not care that much if the plot takes a break because the characters themselves are enough to keep you interested. And I don't think that The Legend of the Galactic Heroes works like that for me. The characters are important, of course, and they're definitely characters I enjoy following. But for me, the real strength of the series is the larger overall plot. I want to see what happens with the war. I want to see the political decisions. I want to see the strategies, the betrayals, the changes in power, and how one event leads to another. So when the plot slows down and the things happening aren't that interesting, I definitely feel it. And that is what happened at the beginning of Upheaval. It wasn't terrible or anything like that. I just found myself a little disappointed because I know how good a series can be when everything is happening. There have been books in the series where the plot moves forward at an incredible pace. Something happens and then it has consequences and then another character reacts to it and before you know it the entire political situation has changed. And those are the moments where I really love this series. And at the beginning of Upheaval, I wasn't getting that same feeling. The plot felt just a little slow and not particularly exciting. But thankfully it's starting to pick up again. I'm getting further into the book and things are becoming more interesting. So I'm hoping the second half will deliver the kind of political and military developments that I enjoy most about the series. I'm definitely not giving up on it. One slower beginning isn't going to change my opinion of the series as a whole. I've enjoyed far too many of the previous books for that. And because this is such a plot-driven series, sometimes a slow section is probably necessary to set up something bigger later. So hopefully that is what's happening here. But yeah, I will definitely talk more about the book once I've actually finished it. But right now I would say that it started slowly, but it's beginning to improve. And after Upheaval, my next read is going to be the Futurological Congress by Stanislav Lem. And I do actually hate this title. But this is a book that got my attention in a slightly very booktube way. Because Guy Rideau did a book haul video where he talked about books based on movies or books that later became movies. And I'll put a link to that video in the description below. Because I think he shows a lot of great books in that video. And one of the books he mentioned was the Futurological Congress. And what immediately caught my attention was the comparison to the movie Inception. And I don't know exactly how similar the book and movie are. I don't think they are. But the comparison alone was enough to make me interested. And Inception is one of my favorite movies. I just love the way it plays with reality and dreams. I love the idea of not always knowing what level of reality you are in and having to keep up with what is actually happening. So when I heard that that this book deals with multiple realities and trying to figure out which one is real, I was immediately intrigued. And that sounds just like exactly the kind of strange science fiction concept I enjoy. I don't know much more about the book, and I actually want to keep it that way. Sometimes it's fun going into a science fiction novel without knowing too much. Especially with a writer like Stanislav Lem, I'm expecting something a little strange. And that's also a reason why I'm looking forward to it. And it's also a very short novel. And after reading Hyperion, which is a much bigger and denser book filled with world building and ideas, I think it will be nice to end the month with something much shorter. Of course, a short book doesn't necessarily mean a simple book, especially when the story involves multiple realities, but at least it should be a quick read. And hopefully it will be a fun one. So yeah, that's all what I'm currently reading and what I'll be reading next. And let me know if you read any of these books. What did you think of Hyperion? And if you've read both Hyperion and Dune, which one do you prefer? And please don't spoil anything from The Fall of Hyperion, because I definitely want to go into that one as blind as possible. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one.